Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Raymond Yeung. Here are tonight's top stories. Carrie Lam orders all residents to be tested 3 times next month. Hong Kong's COVID death toll rises as the city records over 6,000 new cases. And tensions escalate as Moscow orders troops into separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. Everyone in Hong Kong must undergo COVID tests next month. The massive program will be carried out according to age groups as the city battles the Omicron variant. Isaac Lee reports.
Under a new backdrop, combating the epidemic with staunch national support, Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced the latest initiative to fight COVID. From next month, everyone in Hong Kong will be tested 3 times according to their age. To cope with the massive numbers, hundreds of testing stations will be set up across all 18 districts. Lam said the major operation would not be possible without mainland assistance, as testing capacity will be boosted to 1 million per day. In between the 3 tests, Hong Kongers will have to undergo rapid antigen tests on their own every day. The kits will be distributed after they complete the first 2 compulsory tests. To minimize the waiting time, bookings have to be made in advance. Those taking the test can be accompanied by 2 elderly relatives or children.
As far as the compulsory universal test, which we intend to do, there is no instruction from the Central People's Government of a lockdown. Let's focus on how we could ensure the 7.4 million people in Hong Kong will embrace this compulsory universal testing and take an active part so that it will be a successful scheme.
With thousands of cases reported per day, Lam is also determined to combat the spread of Omicron by increasing the number of quarantine facilities. By the end of this month, the current 5,000 units of quarantine rooms will be more than doubled to 12,000. Another 16,000 units are expected to be available by the end of March. This will involve renting a number of hotels and restructuring the Kai Tak cruise terminal. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
In a first, schools will go on summer break next month, with classes to resume after Easter. And most social distancing measures will be extended until mid-April, while restaurants can no longer serve more than 2 diners at one table. Students across the city have been staying home since late January, when authorities suspended all physical lessons. It seems they won't be returning to school for another 2 months at the very least. The chief executive announced the kindergartens, as well as primary and secondary schools, will go on summer break early next month. That means there will be no more remote classes, so staff need not go back to school either. Carrie Lam explained that vacated campuses will be converted into makeshift testing centers, isolation facilities, and even vaccination points for students. Classes will gradually resume after Easter on April 18th. The Education Bureau is working to ensure that the annual Diploma of Secondary Education exams will go ahead as scheduled. Lam also confirmed that current social distancing measures will be extended by 2 months to April 20th, but certain regulations will be tightened from Thursday. Type D restaurants can no longer serve 4 diners at the table, as a 2-person per table limit will be imposed on all types of eateries. There will also be fewer exceptions for the mask-wearing rule in public places. Lam pleaded for everyone's understanding, saying she had no choice amid the critical time. Hong Kong's 5th COVID wave has claimed the lives of 145 people so far. Another 32 deaths were reported today, with new COVID cases at over 6,000. Macy Mock reports.
COVID infections in Hong Kong remained high with 6,211 cases recorded today. Although the number is sharply down from 7,500 yesterday, thousands of cases have yet to be confirmed. Another 32 deaths were recorded, taking the death toll in the fifth wave to 145 so far. The latest fatalities ranged between 45 and 103 years old. Most of the fatalities were unvaccinated, elderly people with long-term illnesses. The head of the communicable disease branch, Chuang Shuk-Kwan, stressed that the virus is spreading very fast. There were over 8,000 notifications of infected cases yesterday, a 64-fold surge from 126 at the beginning of this month. Chuang said the number of notifications reflect the situation better than preliminary positive figures.
Recently, because of the huge amounts of samples, both from the private laboratory and also to be confirmed by our laboratory, there is some delay in sending those specimens and also in confirmation of those specimens. So those preliminary positive numbers are those cumulative numbers that have not yet been confirmed. We think that in order to look at the recent trend, the daily trend, we need to have another figure that can reflect the latest situation. So we use a daily number of notification to us.
There is ongoing concern about residential care homes, with over 300 of them having detected COVID among staff and residents. Meanwhile, health officials have welcomed the offer by St. Paul's Hospital to provide 20 beds for the non-COVID patients and urge more private hospitals to follow suit. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
A health expert has urged the government to allocate more resources to boost the vaccination rate among the elderly.
I think the one thing that we could still really double down on that could make a really big difference in the coming weeks is vaccinating our elderly. We have broken ground on new facilities to build 10,000 beds. We have somehow found 400 taxi drivers who are going to be shuttling COVID positive patients to healthcare facilities. We've seen none of this to try to dramatically increase vaccination rates.
Hospital Authority Chief Henry Fan says the mainland should send doctors to battle COVID as their local counterparts are exhausted. Other mainland personnel already in the city have been helping with COVID tests. Macy Mock reports.
Members of a mainland team were back in action this morning, visiting a community COVID testing center in Yeung to collect samples from the public. Clad in their signature maroon wind cheaters, the group went to Fung Kam Street Sports Center, where a long line of people waited in the rain. Another mainland team dropped in at the mobile specimen collection station at the Ma On Shan Recreation Ground. The Xinhua news agency meanwhile reported that mainland authorities are assembling another team consisting mainly of nucleic acid testing personnel to come to Hong Kong. In an interview with state-run CCTV, Hospital Authority Chairman Henry Fan said he hoped that the mainland could provide manpower support such as doctors and nurses. He said apart from a shortage of bed space, Hong Kong is facing a lack of medical personnel. Fan also said Hong Kong doctors and nurses are extremely exhausted and more than 800 contracted COVID. But most, he added, were infected in the community and not in hospitals. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
In other news, China has called for restraint as its ally Russia ordered troops into eastern Ukraine after recognizing the independence of two breakaway regions. The West raced to announce new sanctions in a last-ditch attempt to deter Moscow from starting a war. Sarah Wong reports.
After 8 years of fighting between Ukrainian government forces and Russia-backed rebels for control of the Donbas region, its fate could trigger a full-blown geopolitical crisis. Russian tanks lining up its frontier with Ukraine could roll into the Lugansk and Donetsk regions at any moment now. This came after President Vladimir Putin formally recognized the independence of the two breakaway territories in eastern Ukraine. Putin accused Kyiv of instigating an assault on the Russian-speaking population there and ordered peacekeeping troops to move in. He said Ukraine's statehood is a fiction, brought to life only by the former Soviet Union, a claim ridiculed by the West and rejected by Ukrainians. An unfazed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country is not giving anything to anyone. But fears of a further encroachment prompted Kyiv to call an emergency meeting at the United Nations Security Council.
President Putin is testing our international system. He is testing our resolve and seeing just how far he can push us all. We must act together in response to this crisis.
Russian envoy Vasily Nebenza fired back, accusing the West of emboldening Kyiv to threaten Moscow's security. China, with increasingly warm ties with Russia, urged all parties to exercise restraint and to resort to dialogue. Foreign Minister Wang Yi assured his U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken that the security and sovereignty of all countries, including Ukraine, deserve respect. Wang urged the West to honor the new Minsk agreement, which granted special political arrangement for the Donbas region in exchange of a ceasefire. Sarah Wong, HKIBC.
And coming up after the break, HSBC's pre-tax profit for last year more than doubled to almost $19 billion. And couples shrug off the cold and COVID to tie the knot on an auspicious day.